Today's conversation is the last session of our 2024 Publisher Series sponsored by the Knight Foundation. The other webinars are on our YouTube channel, and I encourage everyone to watch them when they have the chance. I'm really excited to discuss donor stewardship strategies today and share insights on how to prioritize and engage donors. I think we often talk about cultivation or getting that first donation, but once we process that donation and thank the donor, we often put a check by their name and figure we'll reach out again over the course of the year, and definitely when it's time to renew. But today I want to really talk about what should happen between those gifts, and how to prioritize, engage, and continue to build relationships, even when we are outside of the cultivation phase. We're also going to discuss potential blockers to stewardship and best practices around donor stewardship. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session, and we hope that you're going to come away from today's session with a few new ideas on how to engage your donors. Before we dive in, I want to start with some introductions. I want to introduce my guests, Kaylan Martin, founder and CEO of Blue Umbrella Strategies, and Kimberly Griffin, publisher and chief revenue officer for the Mississippi Free Press. Welcome both Kimberly and Kaylan. I want to give you each a moment to say hello and share about your work and how you first got involved with fundraising. Kaylan, do you want to start?
Sure. I am Kaylan Martin, founder and principal of Blue Umbrella Strategies. We connect community to philanthropy, typically through coaching, consulting, and curating events. Super excited to be here. I'm actually a social worker by trade. So 20 years ago, I was a foster care case manager and worked heavily in the community, essentially making sure that they got the resources that they needed. And so a lot of times that was through government connections, that was through different charities and nonprofits. And so fast forward, I've been working in philanthropy ever since. My first job was with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And they essentially wanted someone who could tell stories about the young people that I worked with without them feeling like I was telling stories about young people. So that is one of the things that I enjoy most is the stewardship of fundraising, and really being able to cultivate relationships. Been working with journalism clients since about 2015. So it's been interesting. You all are one of my favorite groups to work with. So I'm excited to talk more.
Thank you. Kimberly, do you want to share a little bit about your work and how you got started in fundraising?
Well, I'm Kimberly Griffin. I am the co-founder, publisher, and chief revenue officer at the Mississippi Free Press. And my background, I've been in journalism for about 15 years, and my background was with the Jackson Free Press, which is the newsroom we came out of. It's a capital city newsroom. It was a for-profit, or as we like to say, occasionally profit, sometimes profitable newsroom. And I helped manage the sales and business side of the office. I was the associate publisher there. And so I'm pretty new to this fundraising world. It is helpful to have a sales background, but it's not everything.
So thank you both for sharing that and coming to this conversation, and allowing me to nerd out a little bit around donor stewardship, because it's great to talk to others that are doing the work that I do every day. Let's dig in. I think before we start to talk about how we go about stewarding donors, I think it's sometimes important to talk about the hard stuff. So what's the biggest blockers? I want to ask each of you kind of what you think the biggest blockers or the biggest challenges you face right now in donor stewardship. I know for me, it really is having a really small staff and limited time, but I think there's so many other things that we could probably name as things that make it hard to do some of this work.
So one of the things I would say has been one of the biggest blockers, I think, is just how philanthropy has kind of shifted from being able to organically make relationships initially to having to be invited to have a relationship. And so like 20 years ago when I first started, you go online or you call the office, you even write, with your solicitation, and then you get a response back. And it's a very open two-way kind of relationship. Versus now, it's like you definitely have to know someone at most of your larger foundations to even get an opportunity to know who the person is behind like the opportunity. So I think that that's the most daunting thing is like, who should I be talking to at these organizations? And then how do I get in front of them in a very natural way without starting off like the first time you hear about me is through a pitch. And so for me, I feel like that's probably the most, difficult situation when you talk about building relationships with philanthropy.
Yeah, I agree. It reminds me, I think about how stewarding and cultivating donors prior to COVID and how at least there were more natural kind of opportunities. You might be at an event and you might meet someone and start to build a relationship there. I think with COVID, I think it was both a blessing and a curse, so to speak. Blessing because it was easier to reach out to someone and ask someone to join a Zoom call where maybe you would have met them in person or had coffee. But I think it also creates a harder, you don't have those natural ins. Like we are just now starting, I think, feeling like things have opened back up and you're now at conferences or you're at other places where you might meet donors. But I still don't think that is as frequent as it was. You have to be very intentional on creating those. And sometimes that's hard if you don't have that relationship and you're sending an email and you don't have a warm introduction or a warm lead. You are trying to really create that for your organization. So I definitely think that is an obstacle for sure.
Well, the one thing I was saying is that Black and Brown people who are tasked with fundraising, they may not want to be a fundraiser, but they're tasked with fundraising are kind of have these obstacles around money. I find a lot of times, which is who won't give us money, who can't give us money. We often tell this narrative about our communities that they don't have money, and that's simply not true. You know, we're in a poor state in the nation often, and 60% of now some of that's national money, but you got Mississippians everywhere, right? But not all of them are Mississippians. There are people that care about your mission that don't live in your community, but your community cares very deeply about your mission and is willing. I have a friend who's a social worker, Kaylan, and she said, find a single mother to look at your budget and she will tell you what you don't need. And and I think about that. She goes, she said, a single mother knows if she has $5 a month to give you. You don't have to figure that out for her. People know what their resources are. It's not our job to figure it out. And I think a lot of time in this industry, we do that. I come from a blah, blah community. And the truth is you come from a community that has a lot of different kinds of people.
Yeah, I agree. I think another thing that I sometimes see, and I was guilty of this early on in my career, really had to do with kind of that power imbalance between donors and the organization. I think we sometimes give donors an outsized role in the work that we're doing. And I say that with also understanding, I often say that my job is to be the middleman, is to help the donor have the impact that they want to have on the world. So that is really how do I connect? But I also think it's important not to give the donor an outsized role. In journalism, I think we have some of those firewalls already in place where, donors don't have any editorial control. They don't really have say around a lot of things from a journalism standpoint. In the rest of the nonprofit world, we don't see that as much. There aren't those natural kind of guardrails. But I think that really bringing into perspective kind of the needs of the organization and balancing those with the needs of the donor is the piece that's sometimes really hard, because you need the money to be able to do the work that you're doing, but you also don't want to give a donor a lot of power over the work that you're doing, because that takes away some of your objectivity and your ability to do the actual work. So are there anything else that we wanted to touch on around like blockers before we kind of step into how we do some of this, how we do stewardship?
I would just say really quick to piggyback off your last point in terms of the power dynamic. I think stewardship actually starts before the gift is made. So I know the conversation is about, like how do you continue to build that relationship to kind of expand? But we should be interviewing the foundation as much as they're interviewing us, because a lot of times there isn't that alignment there. And that is key to how we are able to have conversations about what is really impactful in our communities, right? Like we don't need the foundation to say, okay, this is what the outcomes are that I want to see, and this is the impact. We need to be that leader and that expert to say, oh, we know when we see market change that this is what it looks like and feels like. And so being able to share that ownership of the work in the way that, yes, we're both, and you all have said this countless times, like we're partners in this work. We share the ownership in it, how it's progressing, where we go next geographically, like all of those things. So I think that that's a part of the stewardship, is also having that thought partnership with the funder on the onset.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing is important is not being afraid to leave money on the table. I mean, not all money is good money. And so sometimes and I've been in those situations before where I really wanted to take the donation, but it didn't align with our values. So it really is important to make sure that there's alignment between the work that you're doing and what the donor wants to see. All right, I'm going to move us a little bit into, kind of how we do some of this. So given that we're all strapped for time, and, let's think to the last end of year campaign that you did. You have now a list of who knows how many donors that maybe this was the first time that they've given to your organization, or they've given something that allows you to say, hey, maybe there's an additional donation. Maybe there's a way to kind of grow that donation at renewal. But how do we figure out who to focus our time on? What criteria and strategies do you all use to identify which donors to prioritize?
We use a wealth screen, and I find that this is something that people ignore in our area of the world. I don't know why we wealth screen everyone who gives us any money, and there's one built into our CRM, but you can just, if you're a member of the Institute of Nonprofit News Media, they'll do like 500 for free. But also, just about every organization you're involved in will do some of these for free if you ask, or they'll do them for cheap if you can get that first 500 done, because you don't know what you don't know. In the last 90 days, we transitioned, I don't know, funnel transition pipeline, $100 donation into a $10,000 donation. We didn't know this guy. He gave us $100. The wealth screen said he could give us quite a bit more money. We called him up and said, can we have a meeting? He was like, sure. These people are rich. They're just people, they know. They're not unbright. You know why we were meeting. He's like, I know you're not calling me because you think I'm interesting. I am interesting, but what do you need? And so I think that is a tool that I cannot express how much you need to use it. Because just because somebody gives you $25 doesn't mean that's all they can give you.
Yes. And I think data, right, was the way that you were able to say, I know this donor. And I think a lot of times we even skip over that. We know, okay, Kimberly gave a donation. She gave $100. How often is she giving the $100? That's my favorite criteria. It's like, okay, they give every year the same time, or they give every month or something like that. I always start with the recurring donors because those folks made you a part of their budget. So even if it's the $10, even if it's $100, I want to have conversations with all of them. So the ones that from the wealth screen or whatever due diligence you find to say, okay, this person is wealthy, even if they're not, this person still is intimately connected to your cause or to your organization for a reason, especially if you didn't invite them to. So if they're walking off the street and they're deciding to donate to you, whatever increment it is, especially on a consistent basis, those are people that you want to talk to, because at the very least, they're going to connect you to other people that think like them that will also be able to be donors. And so, you know, there's a statistic that talks about like teachers and other folks that are in working class professions are typically the ones that will do a bequest or an endowment. So they might not be able to give you the 100,000 right now, but because you were near and dear to them, you made sure that, you know, important issues got heard throughout their community. You featured their grandmother one time, those types of things, they'll remember you. And so that's the type of longevity that you want for your organization, especially when we talk about how to continue to generate revenue. So that's who I follow up with, is the folks that are closest to the organization, because again, at the very least, they can connect you to others.
I do want to point out something I think we do that's really important is we call every new donor, like call them on the phone, not text, not email, unless we don't have that information. But autofill, most people give us that information because they click a button and it fills the need. We call $5, $1.20. We call them on the phone. And we write that into our job descriptions. You must be willing to call and say thank you. And that's not asking for more money. It's just saying thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing that I often say is that fundraising is an art. It really is an art and a science. And I think if you're very new to fundraising and you're perfecting the art, rely on the science, rely on the data, rely on the things that you can rely on, because that at least will give you some way to at least filter through. And something that you said, Kaylan, I often say, you know, those lower level donors, they sometimes are cash poor but asset rich. And so it's building that relationship and how do you move people kind of up the fundraising pyramid. So you bring them in at a lower level, introduce them to the organization, but then you want them to become an annual donor. Then you want them to become a major donor, then a planned gift, then a bequest. And so it really is about building those authentic relationships. And one of the other ways that I often am trying to, when I look at a list and I get a list of 100 names or however many names I need to look at to try to prioritize, I'm really looking at who can close the quickest, because I might only have the capacity to have an active pipeline of 25 people that I am in that stewarding process with. So who are the people that I can engage throughout the year in a way that's frequent touch, but that I think is going to get me at the end of the day, that's going to allow me to close a larger gift, renew someone, and do that when I'm doing everything else. So I think it definitely is the art and the science piece. Before we go on to the next topic, I just want to remind people that we are going to be doing Q&A here in a little bit. So be thinking of your questions that you might want to ask Kimberly, myself, or Kaylan. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is how, given that nobody has like a 20-person fundraising staff, we're often trying to do this we're trying to scrape together. It might be 1, 2, 3 people on a staff. How do you all engage the board and others in stewardship? So an example for me that I've done at other places, I've had individuals that wanted to volunteer, but we didn't have necessarily a clear path to volunteering with our newsroom. But I was able to create a fundraising committee. So these were folks that were involved in the work, were interested in what we were doing, wanted to kind of be an advocate for us. And we were able to convene a fundraising committee that met every month, and we kind of looked through our pipeline, and I was able to pull in people that might know other high wealth individuals or could attend meetings with me or could make introductions, and it was very helpful. But I'm just curious to know how you all engage the board and others in stewardship, the stewardship work that you do.
I can jump in. I will go back and say the board, if you look at the folks that are in your organization and you look at it as like one of those concentric circles, right? Like you're here and then it's the board, then it's volunteers, then it's community or however it's situated for you. I think whatever everyone already does naturally, that's what you want them to do for you. So I'm never going to ask somebody to do something that is out of their wheelhouse or their comfort zone, because I want it to be done in excellence and I want it to be done with excitement and all those things. So with a lot of outlets and publishers, the thing that's interesting is you all do like 100 different things. So if you're a part of 8 different associations, 10 different boards, just talk about our organization to those different platforms as appropriate. Not trying to create any conflicts of interest, not trying to step on any toes or other roles that you have there, but introduce us into those circles, or at least talk about us in those circles. If you're a professor and, you know, the students do like a newspaper, come and interview, you know, the outlet as well, you know, and those types of things. I love getting students and young people that are emerging journalists involved with different outlets, because they are actually like street cred for organizations to say, yeah, I know you see this one on Instagram, but they don't actually do the work. Like, here's the students, here's the community, here's the people saying, no, I like Mississippi Free Press, you know, so that's what I like. I like to see that organic generation of gratitude and of, you know, connections that happen when people are just doing what they already do, but on behalf of or in the spirit of the organization too.
Yeah, it's interesting because we are what we call a quasi startup. Our journalism isn't a startup, but we're startup nonprofit. And you know, your first board thinks you're wonderful and magical, and they really don't want to raise money, but they think you're wonderful and magical, and they don't ask you a lot of questions. Then, you know, slowly you get a board to start asking questions, and as they ask questions, they also fundraise more because they see the need. And so I always think it's important to have a board that's as a fundraising board, especially with a small organization. However, it takes some time to cultivate and explain that. And so one of the things that we are doing, because we're still in this process of explaining that, but we have something Donna, my co-founder, came up with. It's called a bucket list. And it's like, can you do an employee match? A lot of people can, they just haven't thought about it. Can you introduce me to 5 people that can give $2,500? Can you introduce me to 10 people that can give $1,000? Can you do these things? And you let them find a pipeline, because if they hear they hear us saying, well, I just went and got $100,000, it's very scary, right? And they're like, well, I don't know. But if you give them these entry points, then they can find a place where they can land. And then we too have a fundraising committee that has been quite helpful in helping us think about goals and aspirations and grants that may not be in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, I love that. I've used that. I've used kind of something similar to your bucket list with other boards in the past, because what I found is that sometimes board members have been invited to be on the board because you need a body, you need a person. Can you come? And, you know, I haven't seen this as much, thankfully. But I remember, you know, 10 years ago, I would talk to board members and they would say, I was never told I needed to fundraise. I was told I needed to come to a meeting once a month or maybe come to an event. And so I often encourage 2 things. One, always have a job description for your board members and make sure kind of It could be a give get, like the expectation is either you write a check or you go get the money, or it could be both. You never want to create a barrier to someone that might not have the capacity to write a check for $1,000 to your organization. So give them options. So definitely having the job description, but I really like the bucket list and the list that I use. Some of it is stuff that is fundraising adjacent that helps people get used to fundraising. So it might be, hey, we're in November. This is the month of gratitude. You're a board member. I want you to call 10 people and just thank them. Don't actually ask them for money, because we can do that, but it's really powerful when your board or other folks that aren't being paid by the organization reach out and thank people for their gift. So I think, and then I often always leave a blank line on that document of what they could do, because sometimes people have great ideas. I had someone at an organization that worked for a TV station and said, hey, I can't do these 3 things, but I can have somebody create a professional video for you. So we would have never thought to ask that, but that was a way that they could use kind of the things that are at their disposal to help the organization in a really big way. So I think definitely I love the bucket list. And I think, Kimberly, that's something we're going to share after this for people that might be looking for a tool to engage their board. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and we've touched on this a little bit, and around kind of balancing the organizational needs and the donors' needs. And I know we talked a little bit about how our personal relationships with money and how can affect kind of how we interact with our donors. So I'm wondering, how do you all center the needs of the organization while still valuing and respecting the needs of your donors? So what strategies have you employed to kind of help find that balance to make sure that, that the needs of the donors are being met, but also that your organizational needs are being met as well?
I would say start with the real costs. A lot of times, just like in our own personal budgets, we see, I have this amount of money coming in for income, and then you really don't know where it goes. If you know line by line that the real cost of doing business is XYZ, not what I would like it to be, but what it really costs to do the business, then you can talk again based on data. So I'm not asking you for $100,000 because I just want $100,000. I'm asking you for the $100,000 because line by line, this is what it costs to do impactful work like we do. And that goes back to, again, being able to have community and other people advocate or to also endorse what you're doing, because then that is the validation that you need sometimes without you having to say it. So without me speaking on my behalf and saying my organization is doing great work, I already have edified that through the other stewardship avenues I've done. And now when I go into a conversation with the donor, we're not talking about the impact. We're just talking about the dollars. And that I'm doing the work, it's already been confirmed. And this is what I'm telling you is the cost to doing business. If they want to modify, and say, okay, well, I can come in at 50,000, then this is what you get for 50,000. But no more is, okay, you've given me 50,000 and I'm still doing $100,000 worth of work. We're not doing that. We're just, whatever the budget is, and instead of saying a lot of times with foundations, instead of saying, okay, I have $100,000 ask, I'll say, what is your budget to support XYZ work? Like, where in your portfolio do you have room to support this work in this fiscal year or next fiscal year? And then we can work back from that, because I know you already want to have this impact because we're in this conversation. Now I just need to know what is the wiggle room that I have in terms of budget. So again, that has been the way that has made it most easy for me to have the conversation. what's your budget? This is my budget, those types of things. And then just negotiate from there. But never do an amount of work that you can't afford to do, because then the work won't get done in excellence. And then that's a bigger problem.
Yeah, I think another thing that we sometimes see is creating new bodies of work to meet the needs of a funder, and that's very much mission drift. So I think we have to be, oh, we'll just do this. We'll start a new vertical. We'll start this. We'll cover this topic area. And unless it really fits with your strategic plan, it probably doesn't make sense. And sometimes you have to say, that really doesn't fit the work that we're doing. I think the other thing that I often see is, oh, well, so-and-so gave this organization $1 million. So we should go and ask for $1 million. But really, we need to step back and continue to have the conversation. Is there alignment? Is the work that we're doing? And I think that's how I often approach conversations, is that initial conversation really is an alignment check. Are we doing the work that you want to support? Because after that, everything is a negotiation. But if we're not aligned around the work that we're doing and what you want to support, there probably isn't a need for a second conversation. And that's okay. I mean, sometimes I would rather hear no in the first conversation than 5 conversations in, if you knew at the first conversation that it probably wasn't a fit. But I think it really is still doing that, what makes sense, not necessarily holding your organization up as success around fundraising as to what other organizations are getting. I think it can be kind of a guide, like, hey, here's somebody that we know is also interested in journalism, but it really has to be a fit. And so it's not really, oh, they gave to this journalism organization, they're going to give to every journalism organization. That's not necessarily how it works. It's often not how it works. And so it really is still, it gives you a clue, but you still really have to build that relationship with that donor.
Yeah, and I was going to, Kimberly Spencer, I was going to say, that's one of the things we had to learn. We learned it pretty quickly, is that if you want to sponsor, journalism on the Pelicans dying on the Gulf Coast, but probably not. We probably are actually doing that story now because we have an environmental reporter. But 4 years ago, we were not doing that story. And then I need to say, here's an outlet that is doing that work. Support the work you're doing or the work that's in the pipeline, not the work that you just need to get money in the door, because that's going to create, like Kaylan said, you're not going to do it in an excellent way. The other thing I think about is, the funders need us. And it takes you a while to get there. Kimberly Spencer taught me this. The funders need us. They need to be on the right side of history. They need to try to protect democracy. We are going up in flames. They need us because they want to do something and they often don't know what to do. They want to do the right thing. They just don't know how to do it. They don't know who to do it with. They don't know what to do. And so for me, it's that conversation of how we go back to the goals being aligned, the mission being aligned, what you want out of the world being aligned. And I hope that our journalism demonstrates why there's a partnership. I don't know if there's much more than that. I mean, we throw a good party and I want them to come to that, but I think in the relationships, and I do think right now having relationships with people that are operating in some realm of sanity is very important to people.
Right.
Like to just talk to people who not agreeing on everything, but just somewhere, and we're somewhere in the same tent talking about at least the same reality. And that's really important to people. And I think when you have these conversations during this critical time, you get off the phone and people will email us and say, oh, it was just so nice talking to you. It was just so nice. And so I think it's easy. For me, it's just keep doing what you're doing and be who you are. And another thing I always think about is if that alignment wasn't there the first time you have the conversation, it's probably not there the second time you have the conversation. And you're like, maybe I could I don't, no, it's probably not. Right. Your first mind was right.
That's so true. We're going to jump to question and answer in just a second. So people drop. So if anybody has questions, please drop them in. But before we do that, I want to talk about best practices in donor stewardship. So could each of you give me a example of kind of some successful best practice or some best practices in stewardship? One that I always talk about is stewardship plans, because I think we have great ideas to reach out to folks. All right, we closed a gift. We're going to reach out, but we all are pulled in so many different directions. I see if we have something written down that shows maybe the next 6 to 8 months how we're going to reach in contact. That at least gives us a plan, and then we can set up calendar reminders and those things so they don't get lost. So for me, that is definitely a best practice that I have around donor stewardship.
Yeah, I think some of the things we do is, of course, that initial phone call to thank you on the phone. If you can't get them on the phone, then email. It's a second way to thank you. And then we do what we call MSP updates from the NSP. It's not a newsletter. It is an email from one of us personally. If it is our director of giving, it is, if it's under a certain amount, she does them. If it's over a certain amount, I do them. But it's really like, I'm a person that we're like, check, this is what happened, check, check, check. She likes more narrative, but whatever the update is, here's the stuff that's happening in our world. We got a report for America Report. We won this award. We got this grant. We hired a new staff member. Donors really appreciate that because you don't see them as a slot machine. So that's one thing we do. If we're in the city, because journalism conference is the journalisming, and so there's a conference, I opened my mouth yesterday and was like, I don't have to go anywhere for a month. Lies I told an hour later. Anyway, lies. So when you're in a city, look at your donor base. Who's in that city or your supporter base, and we do something called MSP lounges. And it's a lunch or happy hour and cocktails. We invite all those people. We just hang out. Again, people are looking for connections that they are looking for connections, and to have that opportunity to meet people in their city that they may not have known is very important. And I have never had a lounge that people didn't leave and give us money and pay for that lounge. That's not why we're having it, but that connection means a lot. So for us, it's just continuing to have those real conversations with people and keeping them in the loop, treating them like they're a team member. They are. You're a team member. Here's what's happening. We're so excited. No asking for money.
I love that. And that is definitely the stewardship plan mixed with invitations and all that is like the crux of it, right? That's the foundation. I think with the stewardship plan too, it has to be based on something that is static across. So that could be donor amount, that can be type of gift or something like that, so that it's uniformed and consistent. And then the team can start to do that in a cyclical way. One of my cheat codes for stewardship is to do Google alerts for the program officer, the CEO of our top donors. So anytime that they're in the paper, they had an accomplishment or something special, I get an alert to my inbox. So then I can say, oh, I see you, Kimberly. Congratulations on the new award. Because them doing good in the community it helps us as well. So I want to make sure that they know that I'm excited about their accomplishments and their achievements too. Definitely sending out our impact reports and little, snapshots and things like that. But my favorite thing to do is to see our funders in the news, and then it can also help when you might not want to be associated with them anymore too. Because you start to see stuff coming down the pike. But it also allows you to really celebrate them and to stay engaged. So, yeah.
We do have a few questions. So I think my first question, let's see. This is a really good one. If you only have a few hours in a week to dedicate to stewardship, what would you recommend doing? Like, what is the most, what is the thing that can get you the most mileage for things that you do?
Okay, so social worker hack. Every day I would allot time for something because I had to go to court, I had to do a briefing, I had to meet with a parent. So I do the same thing in fundraising. Like, this is my day for this type, and this is my day for this. If you have opportunity to say, okay, I have 2 hours for stewardship, and you are the owner of the outlet, publisher, whatever, that's to say thank you. Your couple of hours each week, I think you get the most mileage when you show gratefulness and you say thank you. That can come in different formats, an invitation, that can come, and a report or whatever. But as long as you're saying thank you, and showing your gratefulness, I think that's the thing that's going to carry you the furthest in terms of stewardship in a broad sense.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. So if you only have a few hours, here's what I would do. Those volunteers. So y'all have your thank list. You got 100 new donors. Split those up. You thank some, they thank some. So that's out the way. But that needs to be a priority. Those people need to get some sort of thank you. I would then use Kimberly Spencer's, what did she call it? Stewardship plan, and decide. And frankly, if you're the person that's in this conversation, your time is best spent getting the most money in the shortest amount of time. So you're going for whatever you consider those medium to large donors. Go for those large donors first, then go for those medium donors, and then have a volunteer deal with your smaller donors. If there's no one else on staff, because it's time for you to work smart, not necessarily hard. So I love calling the $5 donors, and you should do that. But really, you need to spend time stewarding those big grants and those big donors. Because it's going to make life easier. We can get $500,000 in the door in a pot versus $5,000.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's often where are you going to have the most impact in the work that you're doing? The next question, I'll ask the question and then I have a follow-up question. So how formal versus informal should you be with a new donor? And I think what I want to add on to that is, how do you create that authentic relationship? Because we don't want donors to feel like ATMs, that we're just reaching out to them when we need money. So it's the authenticity piece. And how formal are you versus informal with, say, that donor that you're calling to say thank you to?
I'm always formal. I always err on formality only because I'm a very informal person. So that is going to come across naturally. So I want to make sure that I'm treating everyone the same, that this isn't a personal relationship. If you know about my kids and I know about your kids, that's fine. But, at best, we're colleagues. Until we're not, right? So I try to keep everything formally. You gave us this to do this amount of business. Anytime you're working with money, you want a person to have some kind of formality about it, right? So my accountant and those types of folks, you want to feel secure that when I give this person this amount of money, they are executing this thing, and I can show my higher ups or my board of directors that this work was carried out in the way it was supposed to. So I always err on the side of formality. Like I said, me naturally I'm informal. So that'll come across in just how I build rapport. But in terms of business, and everything is all followed up by emails, it's documented, it's verified, all of those things, because we're talking about financial transactions. So I try to err on the side of formality.
Yeah.
I think I'm more, go.
Oh, I was just going to say, I want to just echo what you said, Kaylan. I err on the side of formality until usually the first call, and then I let the donor kind of lead what that relationship looks like and how we're going to interact. And some of them a lot more informal, because you do start to build that authentic relationship. And hopefully you're not only reaching out to them around money, you're reaching out to them around other things as well.
I don't know if Kayla made me think of things in a different way. All right. So I ask the same questions when I call you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your donation. How did you find out about it? What are you most interested in? What do you want to hear? You like reading education stuff. And if I'm calling a Southerner, that tends to be a little less formal, but the things around it, I guess, are formal, like the email follow-up and that kind of thing. Like it may be a little more Southern if I'm calling a Southerner, and Midwest, like we tend to be more warm and engaging, but you still get that same email. You still get the receipt. I'm not treating you like a slot machine. So I think it's always now I think about, I watch white men interact with each other. There's a barrier that's already lowered because of who they are. And frankly, if there is a Black woman in that grant making position or on the phone, there is a familiarity, even if we're not like, hey, sister girl, but there's some things we know about each other that it's a little different. It is, or a Black man, or it is different. It is a different barrier to the relationship. We're already 5 steps in, even if I never get the grant. There's something about that relationship that's going to be different. It's going to be usually something that lasts.
I will say just one other thing. I like confidential calls as well. You all say off the record. I like, talking to a program officer and saying, we need to have a call off the record. I want to tell you what's going on. I want to tell you how to move forward. I think those types of conversations are good and comfortable. I think because I started so young in fundraising and because of ethnicity and things like that, sometimes you automatically are seen as not as professional or not as serious about certain things. So, maybe that is an East Coast thing, but definitely, want to make sure that they know that I'm serious about the work that I do and, the communities that I'm working on behalf of. So if there's anything that I need to say that might be informal, I'll normally say it's off the record, or I need to have a confidential conversation with you to talk about XYZ, but so that there's still that delineation. So
that's great. I have one more question, and I know we're going to run over just a little bit, so I want to be mindful of time, but I think this is a really good question, and I would love to get kind of Kimberly and Kaylan, your thoughts around it. So the question is, how can I frame challenges to donors without them thinking things are messy? And I know we've all been in those moments in our lives where we're like, oh, I have to have a hard conversation. So how do you do that in a way that allows your organization to still to have the hard conversation, but also show that it's just a bump in the road versus things are falling apart, I think.
It depends on what the challenge is. There are things you can frame positively. If you have some transitions in staff, you can always say we're hiring for some new roles. But, we have challenges around elections because, good darn it, they decide they got to give all their money to the Supreme Court election in Mississippi. No, you don't. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. There are some donors that know it's the bane of my existence. There are some donors that know that. Like, I am very transparent. Here is where we were last year. Here's where we are this year. We are still stewarding. We are still calling and this is the feedback we're getting from Mississippians with wealth or expats with wealth, that they need to pour their money into XYZ. And so since you live in California, I need your help to bridge this gap this time around. I just really, because it's the truth. This is a thing outside of your control that is happening, that's not, but I mean, that, you know who you can be honest with. I mean, you do, I mean, you really do. And there are people, I like, there's one donor, and we see him all the time. He lives in Atlanta. We go chat with him or whatever. But sometimes he goes, "Now, really, is everything okay? Like, for real? Like, you seem okay." And I was like, "It's really okay." Like, but I think if you're honest with people and transparent, and you show you've done everything you can on your end to mitigate whatever the challenge is, that they can hear that. That doesn't mean they're going to always be able to help, but they sometimes, if they can't help, they will say, "But you talk about, here's my friend's number, and he cares very deeply about this, or she cares very deeply about this."
I would just say, be honest. Everything is already known. You know, like the thing that is happening in the organization, everybody already knows. So this is your opportunity to pitch it as an opportunity. We have this challenge, and this is where we see the solution, and the easiest way to resolve it. Would like your thought behind it, would like your, advocacy behind it, whatever it is. A lot of organizations I work with need more innovation. They need more young people, all of those things. They know you're the 200-year-old paper. You're not surprising them when you say that. So just being honest about it, show it as an opportunity. This is how we're going to resolve it. And we need your help to do that. Not everybody is going to be gung-ho about it. They'll look at it as an excuse, like you said, Kimberly, to, not chew gum and walk at the same time. But that they're not in alignment anymore. And they say they're going to help and they don't. That's something about them. That has nothing to do about the integrity of your organization. Everybody has bumps in the roads. There's no organization that has never had a bump in the road. We just keep going.
True. Well, thank you both. I want to just say that I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and getting to nerd out a little bit around donor stewardship. I want to thank everybody that joined us today. And I also want to thank the Knight Foundation for sponsoring this conversation. And again, I invite you all to check out the other sessions in this series that are on our YouTube channel. And of course, if you have any questions around stewardship or any questions for Kimberly, Kaylan, or I, please feel free to reach out. And this has been a great conversation. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.